Thanks very much. The next 10 minutes will be a bit different from what you've heard through most of the day so far, in that San Marco and Bob Willis have asked me to speak specifically to a couple of exploration initiatives that have been ongoing now for 8 months or so, which have shown some particular value and interest to us and hopefully to you. So I'll be a bit more technical, but I'll do my best to steer clear of anything that's inordinately so. Many of you will know San Marco previously. They've been in Mexico and in Sonora for a long time as explorers. I've only been involved with them for a much shorter period of time, but I've known them and respected them and their property acquisition abilities and their exploration abilities for a long time. They have a number of properties in their portfolio, and if you look at the list here, what I want to focus on is Chuniba, because it's a place we've done quite a bit of work recently and have brought it up to what we consider to be essentially a drill-ready stage. And then in the Greenfields area, at the bottom under project generation, a recent and very optimistic and favorable results from the Globetrotter San Marco partnership, which has been ongoing for several months now in Sonora. So that'll be the focus of what I'll try to cover here. This is just a Google Earth image. I'm just going to show you, whoops, sorry. Sahuaripa is the nearest town to our areas of interest, at least in the southern part. It's about 3 hours drive east of Hermosillo on good, much improved highway now. Down here at La India and Mulatos are the mines, the high sulfidation mines. Over here, the Dolores Mine. So this is a well-endowed belt of rocks with largely epithermal deposits here. And further to the north off this image, of course, the great Porphyry belt of Cananea and Caridad. The Chunibas property is very close to Sahuaripa. It's just about 7K out of town, so well located. It's 100% San Marco concession. It is essentially a gold property, although there's associated base metals and some silver, but most of the value equation here would be gold. For those of you who are geologically minded, this system is largely structural, hosted in shear veins. It's hosted by intrusive rocks, and the alteration, which is essentially sericite, carbonate, pyrite, tourmaline, is very different from the epithermal deposits in general, and we don't think this is a typical Sonoran epithermal system. It has affinities to Western Sonoran orogenic systems and also to intermediate sulfidation epithermal system. So it's some kind of hybrid. We haven't really stressed too much about what it is, but we do see it as kind of a different exploration play from the get-go than what we might expect to see here. As I say, these are a series of shear veins, which you'll see in the next graphic, and where they intersect and where they're particularly well developed, there are corridors, if you like, around the veins where we get from historic drilling significant widths of grammish gold. So it's not just the high-grade structures we're interested in, but it's the broader halos around them. Now, this is a geologic map which the guys working out of Hermosillo have recently compiled and improved. You won't see a lot of detail on this, certainly from where you're sitting, but if you do see the red traces, those are individual, I'll call them veins. There's not much quartz in them. There's mostly iron oxides and anchorite, carbonate, but they're very linear and with very steep walls and very much controlled by faulting and structure. And as usual, the bigger, brighter balls are higher grade. The red ones and magenta ones are north of 10 grams, and we have samples in there approaching 50 grams. All of this area has been worked extensively by gambusinos, or by informal miners. And if you can see from where you are the short, heavy black lines, those are all gambusino workings. So it's oxide at the surface and free milling gold at the surface. And you can also see color-wise the beige are intrusive rocks, and the green on the eastern side are andesites. And most of the veins, or the better developed part of this structural system, is near that contact. It's on the east side of the property. These are some historic and non-4311 compliant drill results from the late 1990s, just to show you highlighted that there are places where the widths of mineralization are as high as 40 meters, north of a gram. These are not true widths as far as we know, and as I say, it's non-compliant, but it gives you and it gave us a sense of what we might expect if we went in there in the short term and drilled some holes on discrete vein systems. So we ran a soil survey, and we did this fourth quarter of last year. And this is the result for gold. The warmer colors, of course, are higher, and yellow and higher are plus 100 ppb and higher, up to much higher numbers, but that's, I guess, gives you a flavor. And what you see immediately is that eastern zone lights up, as you might expect, with respect to the soils, but also those individual veins appear, at least at some level, to coalesce in the soil anomaly, which gives us a kind of a bigger, if you like, more diffuse target around the discrete veins. That's something of the order of 700 meters long and 200 meters or so wide. So the target's a bit better developed. You might also be able to see green circles, which are some of the historic drill holes we've managed to locate. And the other point I would make, if I can just point, the highest grade and width drill hole is at the very southern edge of the soil anomaly. And the geology tells us that it passes to the south into post-mineral felsic volcanic cover. So we think there's a reasonably good chance that this system continues underneath those cover rocks, and it might be considerably bigger than what we see now here at the surface. I'm going to jump now. Let me just say that, I did say, I guess, that we think this project's essentially drill ready. It doesn't mean we're going to drill it tomorrow, but it is permitted to drill. We're doing a bit of structural analysis, but it's more or less ready to go. On the other end of that spectrum, I mentioned some Greenfields work we're doing. In 2016, San Marco crafted a partnership with Globetrotters. That's Richard Osmond here in Vancouver, and Manuel Montoya in Peru, and they use a proprietary series of metrics based on satellite imagery to help vector exploration into particular areas, and they have their own way to talk about that, but essentially it has been successful in Peru, particularly on the porphyry side of things, porphyry copper. And the idea was, let's take it, export it from Peru into Sonora, where we have, as you probably know, relatively little vegetation and a very good kind of environment to use satellite imagery. The idea is to have a better toolkit than we have had, and hopefully than our competitors have had in the past. And yeah, this work really began August, September of last year, and I'm just going to show you one of the early and very interesting outcomes of that work. This is our target 1068. What you see in the picture is essentially what you see all over Sonora. If you look at a Google Earth image or if you drive around, it's a big color anomaly. And there are lots of them there. And if you've worked in this country, you know that if you can walk on them and sample them till hell freezes over, and they tend to have nothing in them, or very often they have nothing in them. So there's a kind of a perception, I think, that this has all been done before. This is what we see, and you would see if you drove up on this particular target. What's going on geologically there is a northeasterly inclined panel of largely felsic volcanic rocks that are heavily altered towards the bottom, the darker red colors. And that alteration is quartz sericite pyrite. We've traversed it like everybody does when we first got there, and there's no particular metal in them at all, certainly no gold or copper. So that's the story from the hill. But if you go down the hill, which I'll take you to now, just off the picture and way down in elevation underneath that cap, we start to see a very different and very much more interesting bunch of rocks. This is down in one of the quebradas that borders that color anomaly. The white-colored material there is actually a porphyry. It's a quartz feldspar biotite porphyry. It has a superimposed quartz sericite alteration on it But underneath that and in windows through that, we see what we think is undoubtedly potassic alteration, which would reflect the core, or typically reflect the core of a porphyry type system. And we think, although we can't prove it, we think that porphyry extends underneath that lithocap, if you like, or that quartz sericite pyrite altered material. This is the preliminary geology that's been done. I won't spend much time on it except to say that the red zone there at the southern boundary is the very tip of a much larger hornblende-bearing intrusive, which appears on the 50,000 scale maps here, and it would be typical of what was known in the public domain. But the orange color, and you won't see this probably, but there's a small beige zone just to the south of that. These are porphyries. These are very different rocks than the batholith. They're quartz feldspar, biotite, porphyritic rocks. And when the guys went into this system underneath that lithocap, this is what they saw. And these are not mapped, so far as I know, anywhere in the public domain. This is the alteration in that zone, and I think the only points I would make to you now are the yellow donut there is quartz sericite pyrite, or if we want to speak porphyry, the phyllic alteration zone. The red zone interior to that with a strong northwest trend is what we consider to be potassic alteration, and certainly for us at the moment the focus of our sampling and mapping. Yeah, let me say also that scale bar down there, those hashes are 500 meters, so this is it looks small, but the phyllic envelope at least is something like 2.5 kilometers across, so it's a significant system. This is a photo I took, I guess, earlier this month of one of the outcrops down in the drainage there. It is the quartz feldspar biotite porphyry, and I hope you can see from there are a narrow but very prominent three-dimensional array of quartz veins in this. They extend in all sorts of different directions. They have a kind of a pale rose-colored margin, which is probably secondary potassium feldspar. They contain pyrite, chalcopyrite. They contain secondary biotite and, of course, quartz. So from our perspective, immediately we were thinking we have actually walked into part of a bona fide potassic alteration zone. Just another image that the guys prepared out of Hermosillo to show in close-up some of this material with secondary shreddy red biotite in it, magnetite. San Marco issued a press release a couple days ago, and in that are some of the preliminary results from rock channel sampling and chip sampling here. And you know they're variable with up to 0.6% copper and 400 ppb gold. And 200 and some ppm moly. So we think it's a system. We don't know how big it is. We're mapping and sampling as we speak. But from the San Marco perspective, this is proof of concept for sure for the Globetrotter targeting algorithms and for the partnership. We have a lot of targets from them. Those of you who've worked in Mexico would certainly appreciate that the hardest part of this equation is getting ground and getting onto the ground you want to get onto. So that's going to continue to be a challenge for us. But the more targets we get into the hopper, the more things we're watching on the Libertades, the more open ground opportunities we jump on. So it's an ongoing effort for us for sure, but with a good initial result, I think. So for this year, the Chunibas, as I say, some structural work. And we will consider certainly drilling on Chunibas. We would like to drill core. There has been, I think, 1 or 2 holes. We don't have that result, but we'd like to see this in core. We'd like to see the rock types in the structure and the alteration exposed, especially where it passes from oxide into sulfide, and we'd like to do some metallurgical work, et cetera, et cetera. So whether San Marco does that or somebody else does it, not sure. And we will certainly continue on the generative path that we started with Globetrotter. We have obviously 1068 that's going to get more work. We have 4 or 5 other areas that the guys have now gotten the laborious job of surface ownership, getting keys to gates, setting up opportunities to put field camps in, and we will start gnawing away at that. And that big Mariana concession you saw in that earlier Google Earth image, which we've basically done nothing on, we'll commence work on that also. So, I think that's enough for now, and thank you very much. Appreciate it.